Share 48. Instead of gate crashing that party, once I was going to getting even. I'd rather be right than happy. I had an AA girlfriend once, and right after we broke up, she hooked up with another guy in AA. She and I were only dating for a couple of weeks, but anyway, she abruptly left me. She was German and couldn't communicate her feelings. I felt like I was owed an explanation. She hooked up with another guy in AA. They were giving a big AA party on Saturday night, and I was not invited. So I am at my regular Saturday night step meeting, and my sponsee, who spilled the coffee, walks in, and I say to him, "After the meeting, we are going to crash that party. Got it?" And he replies, "Whatever sponsor says." So at the end of the meeting, they're doing the chips. And this visitor from out of town that no one had ever seen before gets up and picks up his 30-year medallion. He is not that old. He's only about 48. Then he announces to everybody that this is only his second AA meeting ever out of prison. Apparently he had killed someone with his Corvette when he was 16, and the judge threw the book at him. He had been incarcerated in some antiquated prison system in Idaho or South Dakota, where they had AA, but there was no reciprocity with outside meetings. He had lived this long, isolated sobriety. So needless to say, instead of Sponsee and I crashing the party with a vengeance, we took this guy out to eat and have coffee after the meeting. We checked him into a motel as he didn't have any place to stay. He hadn't been in society for 30 years. He had been in Richmond, Virginia earlier that day, and he said, "I've never seen so many black people in all my life." When he was put into prison, the black people were all living in the ghetto. Now they were running around downtown with ghetto blasters on their shoulders playing rap music. He had never seen a digital clock in an automobile, or a power window in an automobile. He didn't know what an ATM machine was. The next morning, we took him to a Sunday morning AA meeting. Sitting in that meeting, we heard the sirens of President Clinton's motorcade drive by the meeting. President Clinton was visiting that weekend, and I thought of the power invested in the office of the president compared to the power of the people in AA, juxtaposed. I think that same year, just prior, I heard a chief of staff of one of the U.S. presidents speak at a meeting at the National Cathedral Friendship Group Wednesday night, and he talked about the same thing, about the power at the White House, the power in the Kremlin, and the power in the AA meeting. After the meeting, we went to my house in the countryside, because we were headed to another part of the state. I was going to drop him off. He had been promised a job by someone in prison. I showed him around my nice little house and showed him what a sweet little life I had, and we went to a woodworking shop near my house where they build cuckoo clocks and little wooden birds that may have reminded him of woodworking in prison. We drove 2 hours, and I dropped him off on a side road where he said he would hitchhike the rest of the way, and I went into a gas station to get a candy bar for the ride home. When I came back, he was gone. So I drove off and started thinking, that's good, he got a ride pretty quickly. Someone must have picked him up, hitchhiking right away. And I started on my 2-hour drive back home. Then I started thinking, what the hell? This guy's been in prison for 30 years. He is probably criminally insane by now. He could have climbed into the trunk of my car while I was in that gas station. When I get home, he's going to climb out, kill me, and start living in my house. I just showed him my house. I had gone from freely and without looking for thanks, helping a fellow alcoholic, to being completely on guard against the criminally insane alcoholic. Two ends of the spectrum. When I got home, the first thing I did was to pick up a piece of wood, pop the trunk with that piece of wood ready to hit him over the head and beat him senseless if he had been in the trunk of my car. I had gone from helping an alcoholic to being ready to beat him over the head as hard as I could with a piece of wood. He was not in the trunk of the car, and I never heard from him since. Years later, I found myself sitting next to the guy who had taken my AA girlfriend. He had married and had children and divorced the German girl by now. I told him the story of the ex-prisoner keeping me from gate-crashing his party, thinking he'd get a kick out of it. But his reaction to this was the same as it always had been to anything I had to say to him: complete lack of interest.